What's up guys, my name is Jedith, and in this video we are going to be going over all of the brand new DPS trinkets coming in the War Within Season 1. These are coming from dungeons as well as raids, so we're going to be going through all of these today. As you can see, I have them all in my bags ready to go, and we're going to go through them one by one, and I'll show you what they look like. Also, at the end of this video, I want to show you guys something else that I think is going to be very, very important for Havoc Demon Hunters specifically. It's not a trinket, it's another item with a proc on it, so make sure you watch to the end of the video. Just one thing to keep in mind as we go through these, a lot of them are still missing their audio elements, so there isn't that sort of audio feedback when you press the button to use the trinket, so it might feel a little weak. It's just missing the audio. So the first one I'm going to show you is this Void Reaper's Chime, and this comes from the third to last boss in the raid, and it is part of a set. So the set is the trinket and the weapon. I happen to have both, so I can show you exactly how this works. So the trinket, Void Reaper's Chime, your abilities have a high chance to summon a Phantom Ethereal, dealing 97,400 shadow damage to your target and 8,766 shadow damage to all other enemies caught in its path. If the target is below 35% health, this effect summons 2 additional phantoms at 25% effectiveness. So this trinket is just straight primary stat, and then it has the proc effect on it. Now, when you have the weapon, this completes the set. The weapon has its own proc, where your attacks have a high chance to apply Queen's Bane to your target, dealing 79,000 shadow damage over 10 seconds. Complete the set, you get the bonus, where Void Reaper's Chime, which is the trinket, always summons additional phantoms against enemies afflicted by Queen's Bane. So without the weapon, the trinket is just going to be summoning 1 ethereal. If the target is below 35% health, you get 2 extra ethereals at 25% effectiveness. If your weapon has procced, and that dot is currently on the target, when your trinket procs, then you will always get those 2 extra ethereal phantoms. So let's take a look at what this looks like. The debuff that gets applied isn't going to go above the nameplate, but it will show on the unit frame down here. So I've made it a bit bigger for you to see. You should see it here. There it is. It's Queen's Bane. So now, whenever the trinket procs, we should see little ethereal guys. Oh, there's one right there. They happen very quickly, and it's hard to see sometimes. So I'm just gonna leave this trinket and the weapon on for the rest of the video. So while I'm testing all of the other trinkets, you can keep your eyes open, see if you can find the ethereals as they spawn, because they happen very quickly and they're kind of hard to see, but they are there. Hey, by the way, guys, if you're enjoying this content, you could really help me out by dropping a sub to this YouTube channel if you haven't subbed already. I'm trying to get to 30,000 subs before the War Within launches in just a few months, and we are so close. We're like a couple hundred subs away. So if you haven't subbed yet, do me a solid. Drop a sub. It's free and you help me. All right, let's keep checking out these trinkets. Right, so the next one I'll show you is Remnant of Darkness. Your abilities have a chance to call the darkness to you, increasing your agility by 1,000 up to 5,004. Upon reaching full power, the darkness is unleashed, inflicting 5,000 shadow damage split between nearby enemies over 15 seconds before fading back into the remnant. So I'm assuming that damage number is incorrect. 5,000 shadow damage is extremely low, and if you're splitting that between enemies, it's going to be even lower. I think that's just like maybe missing a 0 or a couple zeros. Okay, so we got 1 proc, we got 1 stack of the buff, so our agility is now increased by 1,001, and there's no like duration on this buff. So once we get our second stack, it's going to go up by presumably another 1,000. Okay, there's our second stack, so now our agility is up by 2,002. And now we're up to 3 stacks, so our agility is being increased by 3,002. And 4 stacks, 4,003. And now we're at 5 stacks, 5,004 agility. Now you can see I'm a little shadow demon guy. I'm doing damage. And then it fades away. And then you start the process again, start building back up to your 5 stacks. It takes a while to go from 0 stacks up to 5, but you're maintaining an agility buff that's getting increasingly stronger throughout the entire duration. So you're getting your 1 stack and you're just sitting there with 1,000 agility for a little bit, and then you get your second stack, and then you have 2,000 agility for a little bit. Then you get 3,000 agility for a little bit, and then 4,000 agility, and then 5,000. The duration that you actually have an increased agility buff is actually pretty long. And then once you become that little darkness guy and you start back at the beginning, kind of start the process over again. So I think it's going to be a pretty powerful trinket. And I do think that they are going to have to, fix that damage number, because 5,000 seems a little small. But anyways, let's move on to the next trinket. All right, so now this one is the Sigil of Algari Concordance. This is also from a dungeon. So this gives you primary stat. And then the on-equip effect is your abilities have a chance to call an earthen ally to your aid, supporting you in combat. Oh, here we go. Okay, so we have our little friend here. Silvervein. Looks like she has a bow or something. She's shooting the target. And and then she does a big laser beam. I guess that's like her finisher, and then she just teleports away. So this next trinket is the Ravenous Honey Buzzer. It also has primary stat, and it is from Mythic Plus. The on-use effect is call in a Ravenous ally and ride off into the sunset, or 15 yards, whichever is closest, inflicting 464,000 fire damage split between all enemies you ride through. So it's a minute and 30-second cooldown trinket, and you do not have to, you don't want to click on a target, you don't have to aim it. You kind of just want to like line them up in front of you. It's a lot like the mechanic in the Cinderbrew Meadery dungeon on the one boss where you have to get on the bee and then aim the bee towards a barrel and press the special action button. That's exactly what this is, right? We're going to press the trinket and then we go 15 yards ahead of us and we hit everything in our path. So again, feels a little unimpactful right now because I don't think the sound effects and maybe some other spell effects are added into it. Kind of a cool trinket. You get to ride on a bee a little bit and do some damage. Pretty cool. All right, and this one is the Charged Stormrook Plume. This is another Mythic Plus trinket. It has primary stat on it and an on-use effect. So hold out the feather for 1 second to strike with the power of the storm, crashing down on the target location and inflicting 554,000 nature damage split between nearby enemies. 1 minute and 30-second cooldown. So this does a pretty substantial chunk of damage, and you can either use it single target or you can use it in AoE. If you use it in AoE, that big chunk of damage will be split between the enemies that it hits. But if you use it in single target, it looks like this. So you have to click on it, then you have to aim it. Takes a second to cast, and then you turn into a little ball of lightning and slam down on your target. Now, what I would do with this one is, if it's possible, I would try to set up maybe a at cursor macro for it rather than having to place the targeting reticle. That's what I do with my sigils on a demon hunter. I have it at cursor. I would probably try to do the same with this trinket just to sort of make it a bit more streamlined and less button presses. But let's move on to the next one. So this one is the Harvester's Edict. It has primary stat as well. It's a Mythic Plus trinket. Your spells and abilities have a chance to summon a blood worker to deliver volatile black blood to your target, exploding for 128,000 shadow damage split between all nearby enemies on impact. Intercepting the delivery allows you to siphon its power, instead increasing your mastery by 2,981 for 15 seconds. As we attack this target dummy, our abilities are going to have a chance to summon a little guy. If we don't stand in the path of the little guy and we let him reach the target dummy, he'll explode for damage. If we run into the path of the little guy and we let him hit us, we get a mastery buff. There he is. So I'm going to intercept, and then bam, I have mastery buff, 15 seconds of 2,981. It's a pretty decent little mastery buff. Problem with it is that you can't really predict when you're going to get those procs. When the little dude is going to spawn, you can't really predict when that's going to happen, so it might be hard to line up with certain things. So you kind of have the option to like kind of assess, okay, is it better for me to let him hit the mobs? Maybe there's a big group of mobs and you want him to explode onto all of them. Or do you have an essence break window coming up and maybe you want to intercept it and get that mastery buff right before you go into your window? You have the choice, but you don't have much control. It's going to be a trinket that I don't think is going to be the best pick all the time, but it's definitely something cool to try to play around. All right, we have another Mythic Plus trinket here, Conductor's Wax Whistle. Again, it has primary stat and an on-equip effect where your attacks have a chance to direct a kobold cart toward your target, sending a careening troop that collides with enemies, inflicting 203,000 physical damage split between enemies impacted. So again, we'll just see if we can get this to proc. This is a pretty straightforward one. There's our little minecart. Pretty straightforward. The one thing that I would say about this one is that it's physical damage. So it is going to be reduced by armor. Every mob in the game has a specific amount of armor, and that will reduce the damage that this does. Of course, because you are a demon hunter, we do have crit working in our favor with all of these trinkets. Assuming that isn't something that gets fixed in the War Within, as of right now, all trinkets can crit. When they can crit, they are affected by Know Your Enemy, so they do even more critical strike damage for us in particular. Just something to keep in mind, this one is physical damage, so it is going to be reduced by the target's armor. Okay, so the next one, Concoction, Kiss of Death. This one has primary stat. On use, drink from the vial and let the toxins course through your veins, increasing all secondary stats by 1,349 for 30 seconds. Use again to administer yourself the antidote to end the effect. If the antidote is not administered before the end of the effect, you will be stunned for 5 seconds. So this is a 2-minute and 30-second cooldown. Just to reiterate, when you press it the first time, you get an increase to all of your secondary stats by an amount for 30 seconds. If you do not press the trinket again, by the time those 30 seconds are up, you get stunned. I'll show you what it looks like when you get stunned, because we can kind of imagine what happens if you press it the second time. You live. Nothing happens, right? So let's press it once. We get this buff. All secondary stats increased. Our character grows a little bigger and green. Obviously, we're very, very ill right now from drinking this potion. We have 15 seconds left of this buff. We're blasting, okay? The boss is in execute range. We're tunneling. We're tunneling. Oh, we have 5 seconds left. We're probably going to forget to press it again. And oh no, we're going to get stunned. Rip. Then you're stunned for 5 seconds. That's how that trinket works. You could definitely set up some type of weak aura for this to like really start like yelling at you to make sure you press it before the 30 seconds is up. Should be pretty easy to manage. Is that extra little layer of management actually worth it? Is it worth having to remember to do that amount of secondary stats for 30 seconds? Maybe, possibly, probably. It's a lot of secondary stats. It's not just one, it's like all of them. I tend to lean away from these types of trinkets. There's certain types of interactive trinkets that I really enjoy, and there's ones that just seem kind of like a nuisance. I don't want to be punished. I don't want my character's performance overall to be punished when I don't use the trinket properly. I want it more so to be like, okay, if I don't use the trinket properly, then I just don't get the full benefits of the trinket. Whereas with this one, it's like, okay, you get the benefits of the trinket, but if you fuck it up, you can't press any other buttons for 5 seconds, which really sucks. I don't know. That's just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and let's move on to the next trinket. All right, this is another Mythic Plus trinket called Empowering Crystal of the... oh, God. Anub'ikkaj. Right, so it has primary stat on it and an on-equip effect. Their spells and abilities have a chance to let loose a nascent empowerment from the crystal, increasing a random secondary stat by 2,635 for 20 seconds. We have our buffs pulled up here. Let's see if we can get it to proc. Okay, there we go. We got a proc. So we got the nascent empowerment. Mastery increased by 2,635. And then if you get another proc while this one is still rolling, it just replaces it. So this could like suddenly change to haste, it could suddenly change to verse, or it can just drop off and then you get nothing. You have to wait for your next proc. There we go. So this one, yeah, now it's verse. And again, if I were to get another proc while this one was still rolling, it would just change to a different stat. Hands off type of gameplay with this one. You just kind of get a stat. You hope you get a good one. Luckily for Havoc, all the secondary stats kind of do something, so it's not like worst thing in the world to get one of them. Yeah, this isn't one that you can necessarily cheese or try to like play around. You're gonna get a buff when you get a buff, and you just kind of have to hope that maybe you get something good before you go into your big damage windows or whatever. Let's move on to the next one. All right, this one is the Abyssal Trap. Again, has primary stat. It has an on-use effect where you place an Abyssal Trap at your feet. When an enemy comes within 8 yards, a giant water bubble is created for 10 seconds. All enemies within the bubble take 26,000 frost damage every second. So that's 26,000 damage every second for 10 seconds. The trap will exist for 1 minute before being automatically disarmed. So you can pre-place this trap on the ground and then pull mobs through it to activate it. So you don't have to use it right away. Now, one thing to note about this trinket is it says that all enemies within the bubble take X amount of frost damage every second. So we can assume that it's probably uncapped, which is the thing that makes this trinket kind of good, right? Because the damage on it alone just isn't really that much. 26,000 frost damage every second for 10 seconds, 260,000 frost damage total. If you're doing that on an uncapped amount of targets, it could be pretty good. And again, you can pre-place it and then pull enemies through it or whatever. So this is what it looks like when you pre-place it. Just looks like a regular trap. I'm assuming they're going to add maybe a different visual to that, but using it here where I just did obviously is not a good thing, because the target dummies don't move. So now I've wasted that. But you can see as soon as you put the trap down, the trinket then goes on cooldown and starts refreshing. Pre-placing it is kind of a good thing. Getting it down on the ground as quickly as you can and letting it start its cooldown cycle again means you're going to get more uses out of it. So you don't have to like use it right away. You can pre-place it as your tank is maybe pulling some mobs. If they're doing an LOS pull or something, you can place it down and then he can pull the mobs through it and you're starting your cooldown cycle onto the next charge. So yeah, obviously that didn't work. So let's place the next one right under this dummy. There we go. So now these 3 dummies are inside of the bubble and they're taking that frost damage every second for 10 seconds. Kind of a cool visual. I really like that visual. I think that's kind of new-ish, I think, for the War Within. Let's move on to the next trinket. This one is a Mythic Plus trinket. Signet of the Priory has primary stat and an on-use effect. on a 2-minute cooldown. Raise your Signet to the light, increasing your highest secondary stat by 0 for 20 seconds. That number will change, obviously. It'll be something, probably a pretty large amount. Your act inspires nearby Signet bearers within your party, granting them 0 of the same stat for an undefined amount of time. This is one of those trinkets where the more people in your group or your raid using it, actually it might just be your group because it says your party. So the more people you're grouped with that are using this, the better this is going to be overall. You use it, it gives you a buff to your highest secondary stat for 20 seconds. Anyone else in your group that is also using this trinket will get a similar buff of the same stat, presumably a lesser amount of the stat for a shorter amount of time. So it's going to give me critical strike, 5,217 critical strike for 20 seconds. And then if somebody else in my group had this trinket and I used this, they would also get a similar buff, probably for less. And if they used theirs, say their highest stat was haste, I would then get a haste buff. Kind of a cool trinket. Again, it's going to be one of those trinkets where in pug groups, you're probably not going to use this because you have to sort of rely on other people in your group to be using it as well. But that buff for 20 seconds just for yourself is pretty substantial, right? 5,000 right away, right up front. You're not having to like ramp it up from 1 stack to 5 stacks like some of the other trinkets we've been looking at. This one just right away, you get 5,000 crit for 20 seconds, and then it's on a 2-minute cooldown, which is pretty good for Havoc, I will say, because it lines up with meta. So this could be a pretty good trinket. We'll have to see. All right, now the next one is the Malfunctioning Ethereum module. It has no primary stat, but it has a chunk of haste on it and an on-equip effect. So your spells and abilities have a very high chance to power the module and receive a snippet of cryptic instructions from somewhere in the beyond. Collecting 10 snippets deciphers them to reveal your next task. It's probably nothing, so complete it to gain 10,152 agility for 15 seconds. There's been a lot of questions about this one after people saw it in the dungeon journal. Let me show you what this looks like. So we're going to start hitting, and we got our first instruction. Just nothing, right? Just get 1 stack, and it just says, stay tuned for further instructions. You have a feeling you'll know what to do after collecting 10 of them. Here we go. Any second now. So here we got our instructions to jump 3 times. I didn't even notice we got that. So yeah, we had to jump 3 times and we got that agility buff. And look, we're already back up to 6 stacks. Now we're up to 7, up to 9. Okay, we got this little orb. I'm guessing we have to run into the orb. Yep. There we go. We got our buff. And these aren't the only like instructions that I have seen. There's been other ones. I'll see if I can get the next one. I'm not sure if they cycle or if it's just completely random, but let's see what the next one is. And 10. Okay, here's the other one. So this puts a little pad on the ground. Obviously, you just have to go stand in it. You get this stacking buff. And then you get the agility buff. So that's yeah, that's a pretty interesting trinket. I think it's probably going to take some Igor shenanigans to sort of track what result you got, whether you got the jumping one, or you got the little orb, or you got the one where you have to go stand on the pad. I'm not sure if the orb and the pad one actually give you a buff or like any sort of aura to dictate which one you got. I noticed that the jumping one did give you a buff that said, hey, jump 3 times. The other 2, I don't think they did. That'll be a little annoying to have to look out for that and keep your eyes open to make sure you see that little orb. The orb, I can already tell you, is going to be very hard to see in practice when you're on the battlefield and there's all these other spell effects going on. It'll be very hard to catch that orb. And then the pad on the ground, again, unless you're like really looking for it, it's going to blend in. Maybe they can do something with that trinket to at least give you a little buff or some type of aura for each different result that you get, so you're able to track it. So let's move on to the next trinket. All right, this is the Twin Fang Instruments. It's a Mythic Plus trinket. Again, it has agility. It's on a 2-minute cooldown. The on-use effect is open the pouch and draw Nyx's Shadow Blade to quickly strike at enemies in front of you, inflicting 38,000 shadow damage to all enemies. You may use this pouch up to 2 additional times within 20 seconds before it seals itself to magically recharge its contents. So we're going to fight these 2 training dummies here. I'm going to use the trinket. It's going to do damage. Right? It does like a little slash, and then within the next 20 seconds, we can use it 2 more times. Then it goes on cooldown for 2 minutes. I'm a little unsure what the practical use for that would be. I'm not sure, like I said, I'm not sure the practical use of having 3 on-use charges for it before it starts recharging its cooldown. I'm not sure how you would use that to your advantage or why they're separated like that. Maybe somebody is smarter than me. Surely somebody is smarter than me. can figure that out, and let me know in the comments if you have any ideas about how you could use that to your advantage. But in the meantime, let's move on to the next one. Okay, this one is the Shadowbinding Ritual Knife. It has no primary stat. It has a big chunk of mastery. Then an on-equip effect. You engrave a ritual seal into your skin, binding you to the shadows, granting yourself 2,592 agility. So it actually does have some agility on it. I'm not sure why they have that as an on-equip effect rather than just like raw stats on the trinket. Because you can see right now I have 44,000 agility. If I do remove this, I go down to 41,000. So it is giving me that agility just baseline when I equip it. And then your spells and abilities have a low chance to reduce one of your secondary stats by 1,209 for 10 seconds during combat. It could reduce your highest secondary stat, or it could reduce your lowest. I guess there's no way of telling. See if we get like a debuff or something when that happens. The debuff seems to be procced from spells and abilities, so we should get something showing up here. Okay, so there's the debuff we got. Haste decreased by 1,200. It's a pretty good stat stick based on that alone. You're getting 2.5k primary stat and a decent amount of mastery, but then you run the risk of randomly for 10 seconds, one of your stats gets reduced by 1,200. I think that's probably worth it. It's a bit unpredictable, but I think the permanence, the positives are permanent enough that it might outweigh that negative. That's going to come down to Sims, so we'll have to see. Okay, this one is the Ara Kara Sacbrood, and this is from Mythic Plus. This has no primary stat on it, but it does have some haste. And this one has an on-equip effect that says your abilities have a chance to stir the sack. Releasing an egg, which grants you 908 agility. Each egg hatches after 1 minute, and the new brood attacks your target, inflicting 5,000 nature damage over 8 seconds. So let's stir the sack, shall we? Okay, there we go. We got our first stack. Our first egg sack. So overcome by parental instinct, you gain, we got 2 stacks now, 1,800 agility to protect your brood. So these are going to expire after a minute. Our eggs will expire. Don't you hate when that happens? And then I guess they'll do some damage to the target when they expire. But I believe we're able to stack this up. Yep, we're at 3 stacks now, and that refreshed up to 1 minute. So if you're able to keep this going, okay, we're up to 4 stacks now. See if we can go higher. Can we get to 5? Wonder what the cap is on this. Okay, now we're down to 3. Oh, so they might have independent cooldowns. Yeah, because we just got up to 4 and then we went down to 3 immediately, so one of them expired. So it's going to be like a constant rolling buff. So each different egg sack is on its own timer. So your agility buff is going to be fluctuating, but hopefully you're able to at least upkeep them at a rate where you always have something going. How much damage the eggs are actually doing when they expire is yet to be seen. So I think the main feature of this trinket is just getting that agility buff and having them expire each on their own separate timer. I could see that being a pretty good trinket because there's a couple different elements to it, right? You're getting the haste, secondary stat buff. You're getting the rolling agility buff, which can be pretty consistent, it seems. And then you're also getting the damage from the spiders when they hatch. So I kind of like this one. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, now this one is pretty interesting. This is going to be, I think, mostly a tank trinket, but I just wanted to highlight this one anyways. So this is the Foul Behemoth's Chelicera. That's how you say that. So it has primary stat and an on-use effect. Inject an enemy with digestive venom, dealing 323,000 nature damage over 20 seconds. While active, your attacks and abilities against the target restore 11,382 health. Cannot occur more than every 1 second. Overhealing from this effect permanently increases your maximum health by the same amount, decaying rapidly upon leaving combat. 1 minute, 30-second cooldown. You can see my health down here, 3,719,000. We're gonna use the trinket. Okay. And now we're gonna DPS. Do some damage, get our leech going. So you can see now we're up to 4 million. Let's get some healing from the hunt. Right, so we got up to 4,118,000, and now I wonder when we use the trinket again in a minute if we can keep, allowing that to climb up. Trinket buff seems to still be there. So we're going to be able to use it again in 20 seconds. So let's start building some fury, I guess, so we can actually last a little bit inside of this trinket window. Trinket. Got our soul fragments for some healing. our max health is still going up. But anyways, in theory, that's how this trinket should be working. Pretty cool. I think this is going to be really good for tanks on, you know, longer boss fights where you're able to get a couple uses of this and actually probably increase your total health pool by a pretty substantial amount. And by the end of the fight, you might have gained a quarter extra to your health pool or something like that. I think this is going to be fun to play with for tanks. And maybe even some DPS in situations, because it does deal decent damage too, right? 323,000 nature damage over 20 seconds. It is a dot, which kind of sucks. Okay, this one we're going to move over to the AoE dummies. This is a Mythic Plus trinket called the Overclocked Gear Orang Launcher. So there's no primary stat, no secondary stats on this at all, but it has an on-use effect with a 2-minute cooldown. Launch the superheated Gear Orang, inflicting 569 flame strike damage to enemies, losing heat as it cuts through them. I'm assuming that this will do that much damage to the first target it hits, and then reduced damage based on how many extra targets it goes through. The on-equip effect is your melee attacks have a chance to crank the launcher's gears. Oh boy. Decreasing its cooldown by 5 seconds. Heating up your weapon, which causes your next attack to inflict 102,000 additional fire damage. I think this one might be a targeting reticle. Let's see. Yeah, it is. Okay, so we're gonna do that. And yeah, it hit all those enemies and it came back. Okay, and now we're gonna watch the cooldown down here. And it says your melee attacks will reduce the cooldown. Okay. So we're gonna keep an eye on that. Yep, I'm seeing it go down every now and then. Okay. Get some fury here. So melee attacks are presumably going to be anything with your weapon. So things like Blade Dance, Chaos Strike, Fell Blade, Throw Blade, possibly, Essence Break. I don't think Immolation is with your weapon. It's not a melee attack. I-Beam is not a melee attack. Okay, so now we have it back up. Let's put it all the way back here. Yep, so it goes, then it comes back. All right, and now this trinket, Ovinax's Mercurial Egg. No primary stat, no secondary stats, but this one has a little bit of a mini game attached to it. Carefully balance the egg's incubation. While stationary, gain 118 agility every 1 second, up to 30 times. Diminishes while moving. While moving, gain 124 of your highest secondary stat every 1 second, up to 30 times. Diminishes while stationary. Additional stacks above 20 grant 60% reduced benefit. Then the on-use effect, which is on a 2-minute cooldown, suspends the egg's incubation state for 20 seconds. You can see I've been standing still here for a little bit, and we have 30 stacks of the agility because I've been standing still, and that gives us 3,555 agility. Of course, that's at this eye level on the trinket. This could potentially go higher, but as soon as I start moving, we're going to lose these stacks, and I'm going to start building stacks of the secondary stat. Yep, you can see there, it's going down. And I think the way that you'll play around this is you'll try to find like a balance of maybe like 15 and 15 or something around that. Might get to 15 and 15 like that, and then you'll press the trinket. Okay, we landed on 16 and 14, but now we have 16 and 14 frozen for 20 seconds, and that's this buff here. And then as soon as this falls off, they'll continue, they'll be unfrozen, and you'll either be gaining or, you know, losing, depending on which one you're doing. So now you can see we're gaining the agility and we're losing the critical strike, and then we can start moving. We gain critical strike, losing the agility. So this is pretty cool. I really like this trinket. Not that hard to keep them balanced, to be honest. You can kind of keep them hovering around like 15 area, which is like a balance between both of them. Once you kind of get them in that area, it's pretty easy to just like stand still for a few seconds and let them even out. What this really reminds me of, if you guys have been playing Mists of Pandaria for the last few weeks, you know, those quests, or I think it's one quest where you're meditating and you have to keep the slider thing in the middle. Goes too far to the right, you have to press the left button to like keep it in the center. That's what this feels like. And I think this is a mini game that I would probably enjoy playing, because as a demon hunter, I'm kind of just like shuffling around anyways. It's not that bad to just kind of stand still for a few seconds. If you have to move, it's not that bad because you are just gaining critical strike, which for us is incredibly good. Critical strike is the more crit, the better. And then, you know, agility is always good as well. So no matter which one you're stacking or losing, it's still going to be of benefit. So I really like this trinket. I'm looking forward to getting this one and potentially playing with it. And with the on-use effect where you suspend the incubation for 20 seconds, you can plan that around your meta windows, right? Because it's 2 minutes as well. So You can get them evened out to like 15 and 15, or maybe you want more crit or you want more primary stat, and then you freeze it, and then you have that balance for 20 seconds, and you can then go into your opener or your meta window or whatever. The cool thing is kind of get the buffs to a position that you want them to be pre-combat, right? So I can stand here before we pull a boss or before we do whatever, and I'm at 30 stacks of the agility buff, and I could freeze it as soon as I enter combat if I wanted, or I can be kind of moving around like this as we wait, and I could get them to 15 and 15. And then as soon as we enter combat, I could freeze it. However you want to do it. I would imagine that getting kind of a balance is going to be the best bet. So 15 and 15 of each or something like that. Yeah, this is a cool trinket. I really like this one. Okay, and now this one. Sikran's Shadow Arsenal. This one has agility on it and an on-equip effect and an on-use effect. First, let's look at the on-use effect. So the on-use effect switches. So there's 3 different weapons. So the first one we're going to look at is the Phyrexian Flourish. So conjure dual swords from the arsenal to rend your target, dealing 369,000 shadow damage over 3 seconds. Gain 393 parry and 261 avoidance until the next weapon is drawn. Let's get this target dummy here. We're going to use it. So this will use Phyrexian Flourish. Okay. So we got the damage from using that. Now we have this buff, increasing our parry and our avoidance. So now it's on a 1-minute cooldown. Once we're able to use it again, we're going to get this next effect, which is the Phyrexian Decimation. So draw a pole arm from the arsenal to strike all enemies in a line, dealing 307,000 physical damage split between all targets. And then after we've used that, we get a new buff. So until the next weapon is drawn, your critical strikes deal 20% bonus shadow damage to absorb shield, which I got excited about reading initially. And then I was like, oh, only to absorb shield. It makes me think maybe there's going to be a mechanic in the raid where, you know, putting damage into a absorb shield is going to be important. It's back up off cooldown now, so let's use that. The next one, the Phyrexian Decimation, which is the pole arm, and it strikes enemies in a line. Maybe we have to target this one. There we go. Okay. So it did some damage, and then we have this buff now. So this is the critical strike, deals 20% additional damage to absorb shields, and now the next weapon is up to use in 1 minute. So this one is the Phyrexian Barrage. Draw a bow from the arsenal to unleash a barrage of arrows in front of you, dealing 205,000 shadow damage to all enemies within 20 yards. Until the next weapon is drawn, gain 30% increased move speed for 6 seconds upon moving after remaining stationary for at least 3 seconds. Okay, it's going to do a big barrage of arrows in front of us, hitting all enemies within 20 yards for 205,000 shadow damage. So that's not bad. That's pretty good. Hitting all enemies in front of us. So this isn't split damage. Seems to be uncapped. We love to see uncapped things. And here we go. Looked a little weak, didn't it? But again, I think maybe with the sounds and maybe they can spice it up a bit. But now we have this buff. So gain 30% movement speed upon moving. So as soon as we move, we gain 30% increased movement speed. And if we stop moving, we then start gaining stacks of this again. We want to get this up to, what was it, 5 or something? Yeah, it's up to 5 times, then we can move. And then the weapons have recycled again. So now we're back to the Phyrexian Flourish, which was the first one that we used. So yeah, this one's pretty cool. It's a lot to try to digest and understand. There's a lot of different buffs and different ways that the weapons do damage. This is going to be a weak or a trinket for sure. But hey, they're getting creative, and I think that's good. I don't know. It's a bit too complex for me. There's too many layers. This is an onion I do not want to mess with. And I don't like onions. I'm not a fan. But I probably won't be using this one unless it's just like super OP, but we'll have to see. All right, this one is the Everburning Lantern. So this one does have agility and intellect. Your harmful ranged spells and abilities have a chance to rouse the lantern's flame, granting a stack of lamplight up to 15 times. After 30 seconds of collecting stacks, lamplight is consumed to attract an equal amount of fireflies to charge the next target you attack, exploding for 0 fire damage per firefly. So obviously 0 fire damage will be a larger number. Okay, we got 1 stack there. We got 2. We got 3. Okay, we got up to 3. It's about to finish. Okay, so now we have this buff. Your next damaging spell or ability will unleash your fireflies upon the target, dealing 0 fire damage. There we go. Okay. Fireflies hit. The one thing I will say about this one is, even though it says it can stack up to 15 times, I find it very hard to get stacks going. I've been testing this for a little while. I tested it last night as well, and I wasn't able to get up to 15 stacks. I was barely able to get 5 stacks at most. So I'm wondering if it's like one of those things that it'll proc more often the more targets there are. Maybe each individual hit against each enemy has a chance, and that's how you get up to that high amount of stacks. Just hitting these target dummies here, and I was trying it on the single target dummy. I wasn't able to get that many stacks. Okay, and now this one, the Abyssal Effigy. So no primary stat on this one. It does have 1200 critical strike and an on-use effect. Gorge on your target's essence, dealing 1.6 million shadow damage, but healing you for 262,000. Damage and healing increased based on the target's missing health. Cooldown reduced by 90 seconds if this effect kills the target. Right away, I'm seeing this as like a sort of like a beacon to the beyond, a grief torch kind of. The thing about this one is it doesn't have primary stats, so that's always something you have to consider when you get these trinkets that do these really big damage on use effects, is that while they are doing that big amount of damage, you're also just losing damage from all of your other abilities because you don't have primary stat on that trinket. So agility makes all the damage you do, no matter what ability it is, agility makes it do more damage. So if you don't have agility on a trinket, the damage that trinket is doing has to be enough to compensate for the lack of agility. I would assume with this one, it will, because not only is it doing a pretty substantial amount, it can crit, and for us, of course, with Know Your Enemy, can crit for more than most people, and then it's also healing you, and it can do more damage based on the target's missing health, and you reduce the cooldown on it if it kills the target. I think there's a lot of extra variables to this trinket that would probably make it worth using, even without the extra agility on it. And you're also getting, 1200 crit, which just makes it hit even harder. Okay, so let's see if we can get it to crit this time. I'm gonna hit the target dummy to get initiative. We'll use it. There we go. So it crit for 4.8 million. Obviously that can go a lot higher if we get higher crit. And again, if the target's health is lower, it's gonna do a lot more damage. Definitely a pretty cool trinket. I'm looking forward to getting this one and playing with it and seeing how much damage we can actually hit for and how often we can use it, because I can imagine in Mythic Plus this is going to be very fun to use. Okay, so that extra bonus item I mentioned at the start of the video, it's this ring right here. This is the Seal of the Poisoned Pact. Critical strike, a large portion of critical strike, and it has some mastery. It also has an on-equip effect. Dealing damage has a high chance to grant you a dose of venomous potential. At 5 doses, inject them into your target to deal 162,000 nature damage over 3 seconds. Dealing nature damage has a chance to grant you an additional dose. So why is this good for us? Well, first of all, crit mastery. Dealing damage has a high chance, right? So the more damage that we deal with all of our attacks, whether it's our immolation aura ticking, whether it's our I-beam ticks, sigil of flame, anything, they all have a chance to grant a dose of venomous potential. And the more haste we have, the more abilities that we're using, faster our dots are ticking. So we have a lot of different opportunities to proc this trinket. Also, dealing nature damage has a chance to grant you an additional dose, but chaos damage is definitely nature damage. So all of our abilities that do chaos damage, like Chaos Strike, Blade Dance, I-beam, Essence Break, Sigil of Flame, all these things, assuming we've taken any means necessary, they all have a chance to grant an additional dose. So you might have noticed it in my buff window here. As I've been demonstrating these trinkets, there's been a little ring buff. So there it is. We got 2 stacks right away. And I think with enough haste, we're going to be building up these stacks pretty quickly. And you can see we're already at 3. So of course, like getting the 5 stacks isn't instant by any means, but it's definitely pretty quick. We're up to 4 stacks now. And there we go. So 5, your Venom Shock, 155 nature damage, and it crit. So again, that's important for us because when things crit, they're affected by Know Your Enemy, so they do even more damage. And look, we're already back up to 2 stacks. This is just like a regular ring. It has very good stats for us. We're not losing anything. And then on top of that, we also have this just extra proc damage that is just going to add a couple extra % to our damage. And it's going to be better for us in particular because 1, it can crit. Second, we have a lot of things in our toolkit to really build up the stacks quicker than most other classes who don't do nature damage. This is going to be a very important ring to get, and of course it does come from the last boss of the raid. It's a very rare item, so good luck, but I think it will go to Demon Hunters probably as a priority because we have so many ways of proccing it and it's perfect stats for us. So let me know down in the comments which one of these trinkets looks the most interesting to you. If you have any questions about how any of them work specifically, also let me know down in the comments and I'll see if I can answer those questions as quickly as I possibly can. Thank you so much for watching and make sure you subscribe to the channel. Catch you next time. Peace.